ngaki pagi thone lambadira tawa ina ya tuluni shibita chani chikores kaza shede tiro
even if one practices Tantra, nonetheless one has to depend on, one has to practice love and compassion the way it's explained in the Sutric system.
Dijidi kanore chidam pagi sangye da phashani tumong wuju da tuzue ngagi nyamne chigi thone tumong wuju tube da tuzue chamning chi di ma bomba ina ani tuzue tu khabu chi gres tinsigo.
So in general, therefore, leaving aside Buddhahood, just leaving that aside, just the kind of common preparatory practices are impossible, are not effective without love and compassion in the Sutric system, from the Sutric system.
Ongsangi shubi gyuse chiyore, odi nanglo la ani ngagi ta pagi wuju tube yi nyamne chini mambo yore, ani wuju tube mishira midus, karres niya shudi, ani kyusok Tati masana kashishi sungni tinanglo la chikti yor. Ningji mena mi chubes, dichi ningji yangda shes. Ningji mena di wuju di chutugo ma res. Kyuso chikti sungni. Pungsang.
Pungsang, so there's the request by Pungsang, so as the tantric text called request by Pungsang. So in this text, Pungsang asked this question: why are there so many who practice Tantra, but not many who practice the preparatory practices of Tantra? There are not many people engaging in the preparatory stages or the preparatory practices. And one of the reasons was that there's a lack of compassion. It's due to a lack of compassion that practitioners do not engage in the preparatory practices. So then it says, there's this line where it says, it is not established because there's no compassion. Therefore, one needs to understand pure compassion. So in other words, when we're not established, when we're not getting any results without compassion. So therefore, compassion needs to be understood.
Pungsang shibiju.
So the request from Pungsang, the tantric text was requested. I don't know the Sanskrit word for Pungsang.
Chidam ngagi kabla ani pagi tolu la tabshi sungjil ki je she ngagi kabla ani tabda shiram woji du ki je she ni ani tindegi kiring ki kabla ki je di yore zoring ki kabla ki je di yore ta digi pagi tindegi tabdigi ta sugu chubi chani tabi gowaji da yungurwa ta yine pagi ta digi pagi dila tabsini mingdaba da 아니 근데 대화침비 시에 닝지스니 민다바 좀 존재도 전에 또 로그 시비다 전민지 전주심되기 다 찹지 투브레스 나트에 나발라 니다 다 도루네 시비 전민지되기 상지 다 상지 고번 주변에 나체 컨디션 그래 아니 나기 시버디 나체 컨디션 그래 어디시나 아니 신에 아니 찹지 마치세에 놀러 시작되어 주고로 신 민점지기 터네 아니 백이 뒤지나 아니 먼저 다 갈라올다 먼저 고발라 상지 상중의 쇼유스 베디거라 겐상지세에 주요하러 딜라는 팽이면도 고 민지버리면도 되다 가가라
So when we talk about the tantric explanation, so similar to the sutric explanation, in the sutric system, you find the explanation of practicing method and wisdom in union. Now in the tantric system, you talk about the inseparability or the inseparability of method and wisdom, or method and wisdom being of one nature. So this idea of method and wisdom being practiced as of being one nature. We find this explanation during the good generation stage practices as well as the completion stage practices. And when we talk about method, here as the kind of most important principal cause to the Rupakaya, or the form body of the Buddha, for oftentimes great bliss, which is described as the method side, is also described as compassion. So that this is actually just a name given. So one applies the name compassion as in like the wisdom, the aspect of method, one applies that kind of name of love and compassion to the great bliss. But whether this is actually possible to do so, to just use that name and substitute so this with great compassion and love that you find in the sutric system, that is to be seen. So whether we can really just substitute love and compassion with great bliss. So therefore what we need to understand is in the sutric system the tools that are needed and then the tools that are needed in the tantric system. All those need to be understood. And then we can see whether great compassion, love, and so forth in the sutric system can be substituted by great bliss in the tantric system. If it is mere words, well, that is useless, because then we can say there's a Buddha among us if there's someone who's called Buddha, someone who's called Sangye in Tibetan, which is just a name. So just giving the name to something doesn't mean the actual meaning that is behind it is actually there, because otherwise it would follow that Buddha is among us if there's a person called Sangye.
名字是一样，这样子就说是我们必须要清楚的认别在说的名字指的是什么意思。
第二句他多年对比写这个托呢，他去过了这下现在他三节给他啥了看这这个月没，第我是背当略当，他定上略当，你不定住你嘛你起码都在他发现我们讲上面去呢，他给去帮这些经理，他过些月对不是下个了吧？
So when we talk about the wisdom realizing emptiness as kind of the main cause or the mark, the kind of main mark, lakche actually means handprint, so the kind of main mark for the attainment of the Dharmakaya. So usually we say that the wisdom realizing emptiness is the kind of the main mark or the main cause that gives rise to the Dharmakaya. And here it's just a difference of possibly quality, profundity, and so forth, but in actuality it's the kind of wisdom that we learned about that one gradually attains in the way that it's described in the Parchin during the study of Parchin or Madhyamika, or in the Parchin scriptures and the Madhyamika scriptures.
제가 변나네 나버 참만기 투무도 되비 다음에 디간다 안에 센센베기 차로 치니 아니 되게 센센베 시비 아니 취기 다음에 디간다 우마베 시비 아니 다음에 디간다 우마바라는 세다 탄주 시비 다음에 다 딘지 남샤지 요래 다 탄주 시비 다음에 디야 당부 고화차 안딜라 파게 딘지리고 경쟁하다 선도 토네 제바체마게 안딜라미 비시네주 달라미네 사동체 사도 토용디 인절람체 아니 디네 방무순도 토용디 아니 토용체 디네고수 안 딘진군다방 인송기 아니 풍부방 세야저보다 무슨도 통세위 제래야 아니 고농갑고다 두주체니 아니 치루치루 파게 담에도 비시르 치루 치니 다른 방체디 충루 친지 방체 땡도 세니 추구톱 세 남샤지 당주 다 배치기다 그래서 진행이 참 배치기 신경을 더 비다려마도
所以呢，如果我们佛教所有佛教徒共同认同的这种无我这个基础，
So with respect to the Buddhist kind of unique view, so talking about Buddhism in general, there's a uniquely accepted selflessness. So there's a type of selflessness that is uniquely accepted by the different tenet systems. And then you have the Chittamatra system of the lack of the selflessness of phenomena, the emptiness or the selflessness of phenomena. And then after that, the Madhyamika system, also talks of a kind of unique kind of selflessness or emptiness, and that can again be subdivided into truth, Vatantika and Prasangika. So here what one needs to understand is the emptiness as set forth, the selflessness as set forth by the Prasangika, Madhyamika Prasangika system. One needs to get an understanding of that. And then, independent of correct reasoning, independent of correct syllogism, then one generates an understanding, inferential understanding of such emptiness. And following that inferential realization with an inferential cognizer, that inferential realization, then one generates counter-abiding, and then counter-abiding, taking emptiness as the object, one generates the special insight taking emptiness as the object, which means one has now reached the path of preparation, which means that when on the path of preparation, with the union of counter-abiding and special insight, one realizes emptiness conceptually, and then one moves on to the path of seeing, where emptiness realized directly, and where the object of elimination, the grasping onto a self of the path of seeing is being eliminated, as well as the aggregates of the lower realms. And from then one moves on to the path of meditation, which has another further 8 stages. And so by way of the antidotes, the kind of meditative equipoise antidotes growing stronger, then the objects that are to eliminate it, they grow in the same way, they grow weaker, in the sense that eventually one is able to overcome the subtlest kind of obscurations and attains a Dharmakaya. So those who have studied have this understanding, have this knowledge of this kind of procedure here. There may be a difference of like some know it better, some don't know it as well, but this is usually the understanding of how to get to it.
This is the pagi yumonda yumonga shar pacha ta kanji pagi pa chungru chin tar dendu se di se bi wangi dungye chungru chin di chin sar dungye ta bangja gyun tada se de lava na shin pagi bangja kaya gi cho de donyi de shira gi di yoba na shin sujo ni di ji jube gi cho de la jamying ji ta bu ge dang ne kong de pe dang di la de ne di ji chiru drone tar di ji tar du ta sanje ko phang de tu dang ta de gi donyi de shira na shin bang di ni pagi dinji gu do dinji ju na ani shin ne lo de xia ju gu ro ta jamying ji de de sang ji da dinji de se ji.
So with respect to, therefore, when we talk about the afflictions together with the imprint or the residue of these afflictions, well, they slowly become smaller and smaller and smaller. So gradually one eliminates them and they become smaller and smaller or weaker and weaker. And accordingly also the kind of suffering they create, they also become smaller and smaller until eventually it is totally eliminated. So the afflictions are eliminated, the suffering is eliminated, and actually all faults, any kind of imperfection or fault, is eventually totally eliminated. So with the increasing of the enhancement of the realization, the wisdom realizing emptiness, as that increases, then likewise love and compassion increase. And then in the same way, one's happiness also increases. So as the wisdom increases, as love and compassion increase, then also one's happiness increases. And eventually one reaches the state of greatest happiness, which is full enlightenment. So therefore one can come to understand that by way of realizing emptiness, through this wisdom realizing emptiness, it can become clear, to the mind, or it will appear to the mind clearly that love and compassion will likewise increase in that same kind of fashion. They will according to the increasing or the enhancement of the wisdom realizing emptiness, so will these states of mind increase.
Di re de 다 이내 거기 망부지라 디용거로 점닝지 자천부에서 시험마도 아니 벨닝지의 자신은 닝지기 뭐 간대래 거기에 유 간대 요래 거기에라 간대스 제거래 다 거기 벨는 닝지기에나 아니 파조디 다 동네의 탄두기 로직기 고거래 동네 탄두로 예라 아니 가리고도 얘도 제와 공부를 제와면은 동네 탄두로 끼고 말해 제와 여바 이내 그 동인들 수디 마사마이나 탄두 끼고 말해 디인도 전에 닝지기에나 깨고고에나 슈치고 아니 제와 공부도 당고래 지디다 동네 너수디 상로디 바게 공부도 당고 말해 어느 제와 간데스 공부도 당고래 그래서 수수 자지는 뒤에 제와 간데스 끼고래 시에기 따직 남샤지 여러 남편도 도전을 송샤죠 뒤서 균이 매버지 다 지단 잠시 심지 동지 동네다 자와 주지 수도 이셔 잠시기 터네 아니 닝지 공대 연구하러 그래서 뒤 정신심 좀 미신 봤어요 그래서 아니 조지 별로 페디 갑자기 나요 배워도 잘 아니 전주기 심 미시비 전주심 바 베베신스 파기 전주심 정당만 신인기 전주심 바디 진짜 베베신기랬어 근데 갑자기 나요
So this being the case, but a lot of people, so even though they say love and compassion are precious, but when we talk about compassion, for instance, thinking about compassion, what needs to be understood is the nature of compassion, the cause of compassion. Once it has been generated, what one needs to do. So all this needs to be understood. So taking the example of compassion, compassion refers to the wish for sentient beings to be free from suffering. But first, in order to have that kind of wish, one needs to first have love towards sentient beings. So without such a love, such a caring attitude towards others, compassion cannot arise. Similarly, one needs to understand how sentient beings are suffering right now, how they're undergoing suffering. So therefore, without the increase in one's care towards others, without having a sense of how sentient beings are suffering, such compassion cannot actually rise and continue. And likewise, what about the enemy, wishing for one's enemy to be free from suffering? So as it was described, for example, in the mind training text, how one generates love, compassion, how one generates that caring attitude towards one's enemy. Because without such, it is impossible to generate self-love. And just writing the words, so nowadays a lot of people just kind of, they're all sentient beings, be free from suffering and so forth. We kind of make those inspirations, we generate those inspirations. But actually, how can one have that caring attitude towards one's enemy, for example? So when Atisha came to Tibet, he criticized the Tibetans, scolded the Tibetans. He was saying, you train in the kind of wisdom that is impossible, the kind of training of bodhicitta you Tibetans engage in. So you Tibetans train in that which is basically not something one can know, actually, not something that is possible. So you Tibetans train in that. You Tibetans are those who do not know how to train in bodhicitta. So this is you Tibetans. This is how Atisha scolded Tibetans.
다 디간라 아니 가르스고래 다 와저부디나 파게 데서를 베쳤다 퍼진다 우마다 다 디체요래 아니 디간라 멤로 존데 테스토나 제디 이 장인지 가르스키에 고래 기회를 교칸지요래 리베진다 도치네 아니 민지 친구께다 잡아 친구께다 되네 하삼다 전주심께다 되게 디자요다 다 장레디 이내다 전주심 다 고가 지름시 손에 지는 균이 대성기 당해 버려서 말아 진주심이 고가
So like on top of that, so taking myself for example, so I myself, I have studied in one of the monasteries that are called the Three Pillars. I studied in those monasteries, or in one of those monasteries, I have studied the scriptures such as the Perfectional Wisdom Sutra scriptures. I've studied the Madhyamaka scriptures. I've shown an interest in the lumbering teachings, so I followed with interest and inspiration towards practicing those. I have learned about the causes of compassion, how to generate it, what are the causes, in particular great compassion, great love, then the special altruistic attitude, and then eventually bodhicitta. So I have shown interest in that, have learned about this. But according to the description that is given by Lama Tsongkhapa, the understanding that one should have according to Lama Tsongkhapa's description, that I have not attained.
그래서 딘디 코르디 조지 버데야디 샤벨 페버는 진디 벨 tarchib chiyor. 단당일라 대해서.
Because what I said before about how to generate bodhicitta, well, at the time when bodhicitta went to Tibet, it had spread very vastly, that kind of way of generating bodhicitta.
레디다 제일 무시기 너네 친구는 같이 소요됐으나 아니 너네 친구 뒤에 학생 기대면 아침에 학생 고민을 아니 같이 소요됐으나 남 저발라 동반이기 또바 장내 제기수 조그발라 민점시 나양스라 파게다 돈이기 돈이 장비 토네다 남 장제 아니 갈라왔다 이렇게 친지 되게 남샤디 되게 쉬디에디 아니 민점 두스 디송거와 쇼단 숨겨고
So likewise, so as it says in Lama Tsongkhapa's Namrinchemo, so this is during the 7 cause and effect personal instructions here, page 47 in Tibetan. So it's just after the altruistic attitude, developing the altruistic attitude. Here it is saying that in order to progress on the path, you must likewise first sustain the spirit of enlightenment in meditation, and then increase it in an ever more special way the higher you go. So this is, and so saying also, through merely uttering the words, that in order to progress on the path, you must go on increasing your knowledge of emptiness. So here in this passage it is saying that one needs to train in the understanding of emptiness. Otherwise it becomes just mere words. So without an understanding of emptiness, it may just become mere words.
아니 대담 타워스 상주기 셈장 레버 장네 고네 공도 케슈버 송네 남트거발라 민점이야미 나오 수다 슈심을 쇼지송로 돈이도 비시라디도 세계 전환디마도 전주심 고네 공도 도치네 파트다디 민점이야미 도스.
So therefore, as I said before, so one needs to have an understanding of emptiness, and now comes this light. So in order to progress on the path, one must first maintain the spirit or the mind of enlightenment and meditation and increase it. If one doesn't do that, those persons do not even merely utter these words. So it will just, actually this translation is totally correct. So really it's saying it's not just the words will not even appear. If one doesn't do this without some understanding of emptiness, so in order to increase one's special way, the higher one goes. So unless one has this understanding of emptiness, it will not even, the mere name will not even appear.
대기다 대기 백이 균제명아 뒤에 다시님 제 뒤주토는 진주성 장애명아 뒤주 제르부치 폐비갑라 아니 디 손댕이 놈의 제등이 뭐 보여라 저는 명장님이 나머지 대성을 고야지를 합니다.
So therefore, with regard to these practices, that was also practice or equalizing and exchanging stuff for others. So Lama Tsongkhapa, when he arrived, when he started teaching, before he was teaching, many people engaged in those practices, but he's saying that to many of them, then not even the words actually appeared of correct bodhicitta.
디 아니 사람 죄당디 진주생이고는 사람 죄당디 온도진지 심진 유자니 소에 되네레스 송고도 이네스 미니 유자니 도스로니 너를 찾아옵니다. 맞아요.
So here Tsongkhapa says that the 22 types of bodhicitta, or the mind of enlightenment, as described in the Abhisamaya Alamkara, that one should follow those, one should practice according to the way they're described. But Krishna is saying, not even I really understand those 22 types that are described in the Abhisamaya. So there he says, this is one way covered by all conquerors, the 22 kinds of the mind of enlightenment taught in the ordinance of clear realization. So he advises to follow that.
The color the seru tayachila, the gongi, sunjaki, ila, yachikdua. Pagi, the Chanju sim that the Gila, cool Shargom Ravichin, Simjit, Masanji, instead of the Tiji Chisutani. That's what it is leisure. Tiji the training, that much using Kies on Sami. Only that the tubache, and the Shadi and the Shadaji, that Sanji, you Momadi, that the wonders of Rujima, the Sanji, you Momadi, that Karlawa, that Sojinkom, Chajinkom, Kirinkom, Sorinkom, and the Shinekom, that Onikom, Karina, the Shindaji, Shindaji, the Paishu Jaja, and it's all the Sanji, you put there the Shindajini, and Keg is watching it in the Yungudu, the Nordres, or the Sudo.
So then there's just above that passage on the literature, the second volume on page 47. Then just above that in the second volume on literature, the English version on page 56, you then find also these words which say that you then hold that the spirit of enlightenment is the full personal instruction, yet instead of training in it, you search for something else and work on that. So here it is saying that above was another quote where you actually meditate by way of the appearance of your mind, like I will attain Buddha for the sake of all living beings. So this appears very clearly to your mind, and you follow this. So I will attain Buddha for the sake of all living beings. So in that way, you meditate on that, but you then, instead of really continuing with the mind of enlightenment, without actually taking that as your core class instructions, you may not complete that practice, but then go into other practices. Something else, such as the practices on Dzogchen, on Mahamudra, you engage in the generation stage practices, in the completion stage practices, you meditate on karma abiding, you meditate on emptiness, so you basically leave aside your core personal practice.
Chizanta Karisun Resina, Chanju Gisem Tangagi Tildu, Sone Mijoma Rasra, Shin Cholishin Bebe, Samambu, she jabber debo, Kona Nawanas, that is the Gisun Huedre. Chanjusim Taro Shuk Yamni Majamaje, any Dishani, any Dili, that Gecho or Dili Zacho, Mashadajin, Changje, any Shibuji Kone Kondu, that to have sort of Tindi cheating, that Mambushi jabber debo, Kona Nawanas, Tindi Mangcheva, the Tindi Chadigus, that D. And the Tiwachimbi, Neshibi, Dena, Shigigi Nusunas, that Tiwachimi, Nenga Shingin Chigitawaina, the Kimusha is, La de Sung de Edi, that Pagi Tanalanichimi Zuma Jebona, Marantara Risha. Pagi Chanjusin, the teaching Lamji Chugores, Chanjusin Nam Gebana, and the teaching the mission of Tsugiris, Tizo Kuara, Kuara Redi, and teaching them Chugodin Tsuitsasuna, Tine, any. 돈이 더 시다지로 휴게 모두 전주심 휴게 이미 선도의 주님인도 지금 제일 무지 김어셔서는 취지에 다다 봐라.
So here, therefore, as it says here in this text, so instead of training in the mind of enlightenment or in bodhicitta, you search for something else and work on that. If you do that, then you're only making a claim to have passed through many of the levels of bodhicitta. So, and then it continues to say, if those who know the key points of the Mahayana see you doing this, they will ridicule you or they will laugh at you. So, here what you are saying that is that one leaves bodhicitta at some point and then is interested in other instructions and works on increasing those other instructions. So this is really what most people do. And therefore, those who actually understand the key points of the Mahayana, they will laugh about this. They will ridicule those passages. In other words, they will laugh about these people. And I myself, for example, I do understand that the entryway to the Mahayana is bodhicitta. So once one has generated bodhicitta, one will enter the actual Mahayana path. But then I have this understanding that, well, I have bodhicitta. Okay, so I can just leave it. Now I can leave bodhicitta. Now I should concern myself with understanding of emptiness and so forth. I do not have to practice any longer bodhicitta. So I'm this kind of person that those who know the key points of the Mahayana will laugh about this. I'm the object of love of those people myself. I'm included in those in this category of people who become the stock of laughter of those who understand the Mahayana.
知道大彻二要的人看那种可笑的对象，是说他自己就是那个可笑对象中的一员。
其实他的用心之后，这个一些当班那么的搞不懂么土当的态度生呢，从而从他们的从那时候，国外怎么来没把那么的带起没事的，别个这些程序生就我们不接参的，他不对呀，他啥他们，第二个别个程序生别个属于们讲过。 근데 송구도 shumong보나네 디나 다 전주선 고아 참마도 매등이 디나 다 시험하고 왔다 디송에 들어.
So then it continues to say that many books and many scriptures say that the excellent conqueror's children, so the bodhisattvas, train in the spirit of enlightenment for many eons, holding it as the most important practice. So this is saying that those practitioners who have generated bodhicitta, who have already generated bodhicitta, who have cultivated uncontrolled bodhicitta, even those who have attained one of the bhumis, who have attained the path of seeing or the path of meditation, or have attained one of the bodhisattva grounds, even they continue to learn about bodhicitta, to train in bodhicitta. So therefore, if they have to do this, so what need is there, and it goes on, what need is there to mention that it could not be attained by those who have nothing more than a superficial understanding. So in other words, if those who are highly advanced still have to train in bodhicitta, those who have only superficial understanding, superficial training, those people cannot attain bodhicitta.
这样的程序生举了戒参，只有我们戒参的广过的些国去绕过是吧？现在发现萨当部 top 3的最个。 사당부 니버 다 파베스 자신 파바이 파는 탑 찬에 단뒤에 정리지 전주선 공고해야지. 배는 다 돈이 무슨 또 찬에 단뒤에 돈이 공고를 나가나시. 이 고아디 무슨 라바 제고 살아다.
So with regard to bodhicitta, therefore, even those who have generated, who have cultivated bodhicitta in their continuum, they still have to meditate on bodhicitta. So before that, but even after the generation of bodhicitta, one needs to still meditate on bodhicitta. So those who have attained the first bhumi, the second bhumi, those who have attained the Arya path, who have realized them correctly, nonetheless, they still have to train, they still have to meditate on love, compassion, and bodhicitta. So this is similar to the direct realization of emptiness. Even though one has already directly realized emptiness, one needs to still familiarize, one needs to still meditate on that direct realization of emptiness.
그게 지름시 숨만나신 진이 조지버대 아디샤다 하나 송여지. 조지버대 아디샤기 있다 하고도 좀 되마다 달름링당 디네 네 정주심 장애다 뒤쪽이 명화디 다 차상디 동대만 나르죠. 真的没有虚拟，아니 조직이다 기루몽고 여인장 아니 콘소 카시라 아니 대초기 초벌 카시라다 상황디비 초벌 나기다 봐 소소소 나네 안 된지기다 담화디 말나에 가리나스 디슈디자네 나처럼 모두 찌데스라마소스 제선다디 먼저 상무당다 가가리샤 먼저 딱나 나는 시부 지자친구지 정주선정 담화디 땅원도에 수도지 계시 계신고 통딩이 뒤지게 문도스로 지모도 섬로나 마포대지 다 조지다 동대마다 제일 먼저 고랑적이디 자주심세 조제 나리디야나 두 섬로 거대지
So with regard to then, for example, Lama Tsongkhapa and Atisha himself. So these teachings by Lama Tsongkhapa, so they're based on Atisha. And Atisha, it's said that he taught Gomtamba in particular, so the teachings of bodhicitta, how to generate bodhicitta and so forth. So these kind of personal instructions or specific instructions on how to generate bodhicitta, what are the different stages and so forth. He mainly gave those instructions to Dromtamba. And so then Dromtamba remarked on that. He said that Atisha has so many different students. So, he gave some students he taught the teachings, he kind of passed on the teachings on Heruka or other meditational deities and so forth. So why has he only given these teachings? Why does he have given those to Dromtamba? And the response was that he is the only person who is fully qualified to give these teachings on bodhicitta and love compassion. So only Dromtamba was the one who was actually ready to receive these teachings with the appropriate type of vessel for those teachings. And so Geshe-la is saying, so what we do is we usually see tantric teachings as very precious. We see those teachings as extremely precious, but we don't pay that much attention to the preparatory kind of practices. So this is different to Atisha, Dromtamba, and Lama Tsongkhapa, who see bodhicitta as the main practice and tantric practices only as the kind of secondary practice.
第二对他即的马永爱见这个的数教的程序性的数教嘛对见这的程序性的个三九个嘛看的是足够的，对不了呀，谁不去马查的这个因素是什么？
So one of the reasons why we don't really work hard on the generation of bodhicitta, one of the reasons could be that we don't really know what Buddhahood means. We have no real sense. It doesn't really appear clearly to our mind. There's no real sense what Buddhahood means, that one cow can attain it and so forth. So this doesn't appear clearly to our mind.
其实他程序性的你似乎了解看这下个的三九个嘛，在第三单位去。
So therefore, not knowing how to attain enlightenment now, we need to understand here how bodhicitta is kind of the principal cause, the handprint, if you like, the principal cause of the upakaya. So that needs to be understood, how this leads to be, or how bodhicitta is that main cause of the form body of the Buddha.
你呢？他帮人了，给这些玩意呢，他等于做的东西都比些了人的，对了程序性的，他如何其他的。 但能去把给这是国的的，这他提升个，而是个人，说那，但那个说那的他挺上给的，其实那些为那别下给啥的，没有啥的钱，没有那啥也同样可以，卡的呢没有啥么那些，说那有呢，就他卡的呢，他身边周边有女把的，说那没有的钱，身边的卡的呢的周边一家店的了，说那个个有吧，说那有呢，身边住，说那没呢，身边没住。 我第一对在呢，他三对，他给他三九个行主编是呢，他某些这个他的帮一个，他三对天气全部西部就主编了，第二部分他决定说那个做啥过来，他说那个说他被得到的，基的呀，他也不啥特别的，他的他讲究什么来是，都是找天气气象去，他能去过的去家里过了。
So. With regard to now eliminating the object of elimination, so this is done by the wisdom, and the assisting factor is bodhicitta. So bodhicitta serves as a kind of assisting factor, and we can understand this to the degree that we understand that the accumulation of merit is similar to money in like everyday kind of life. Any kind of activity we like to accomplish, if we have money, if we have some capital, we're able to accomplish that. So similarly, when we talk about the accumulation of merit, well, whatever kind of goal we hold in our mind, that can be established, that can be accomplished if we have the kind of collection of merit. So if we lack the collection of merit, whatever goal we hold in our mind cannot be accomplished. So therefore, when we talk about Buddhahood, which basically refers to eliminating afflictive and evil aspirations, well, it is the collection of merit which allows us to generate such, or which allows us to attain such a state of Buddhahood and allows enables us to eliminate the obscuration. So moment by moment, as one generates bodhicitta, one's accumulation of merit also increases, also enhances. So that point of view, we understand how bodhicitta is important in the sense that it provides the necessary collection of merit.
菩提心呢是帮助我们断除所断的一个非常重要的助伴的角色。
아니 가시기 데데시기도 가서 다시 제외 돈이도 비시랑 권할래디 디 미세기 때 디기 시다 방제 참모다 제거는 이부 줘야다 디 고민의 것수 셈디 말시우지 거레스 말세나 하고라 말 슈슈우지 거레스 님도 말 다 니가 나셔나 고도 가버리 거레스 제자다 딘디기 말게 기타 유나면한테 다 전주이셈 스파게 전주이셈 기능도 되레스 어떤지 숨긴데도 띵에디 야고 통소 가르스나 단다디 질 안에 통론 탑시에디 돈이 검니 탑에지 차디고르디 이내야 디기 텐지지게디로 니중 고레스 교화슈 잡고 고레스 대신한테 송요 제가 감고나 아니 교화슈 잡고 매인장 아니 통서도 더 요마레스 뭐 다음에 공부도 연구하러 제가 딜라디 다 코니중 잡고지 깨버리네 셈도 지 머지 리고로 제가 디 송단 디추 벽에 전주sem도 수 카페용도 다 다다링이 되시도 땅이 중나 전주sem 전다 머지를 시호이남서 쇼사로다 전주sem 신치기다 디인도 디기 전에 야고지 친구도 디 송해야 돼.
So some people say with regard to this importance of bodhicitta from the point of view of accumulation of merit or how it assists the mind realizing emptiness, well, actually the most important and the root mind needs is the wisdom realizing emptiness. But in order to eliminate the subtlest types of objects of elimination, the subtle types, we need bodhicitta in the sense it provides the force. It provides intensity, it provides the strength of mind, so the determination, so we shall use different words, and whichever I'm using different words, so one of those words will make sense to you, so power, or force, or strength. So this is what is provided by bodhicitta. It provides that kind of strength of mind, that kind of, it gives strength to the mind realizing emptiness to be able to eliminate those kinds of obscurations. And Vishnu was saying, I regard this explanation as a good explanation. So in particular, when we talk about attaining the path of seeing, so it is said in the scriptures that in order to newly attain the path of seeing, which realizes emptiness directly, meditates on emptiness and realizes directly, without strong renunciation it is not possible. And renunciation can only be generated when there is a strong disgust or awareness of samsara. And therefore in the higher realms, the path of seeing cannot be newly generated because such renunciation, which gives this meditating the mind that meditates on emptiness and extra force, since that renunciation that cannot be achieved in the higher realms because beings in the higher realms are lacking this kind of wariness or disgust for cyclic existence. So since they don't have that renunciation in these higher realms, the path of seeing cannot be newly achieved. So this shows that the strength that this mind needs comes from renunciation. And of the true renunciation and bodhicitta is greater, is even a greater force. So that would explain that bodhicitta provides an extra force to the mind realizing emptiness.
아니 좀내디기 전주 있는데 도시 발음 마신이 됐으니 근데 송샤고 sarkhashira 카카시라 요래 이내 다 송당디 도시 발음 자고 인당디 미다지 다 찍려 가려서나 비버치비 싫어서 동반이 있어 산지 유체든지 비버치비 싫어 바 이상 비버나 신로와 디시드니 게 삼로디 코र्स 다 다들 때내 이미 가시 고아마도 로절도 되는 다 추추되는 메인서 사원을 추된 거 저번에 추된 다 미싱디 거래제들 제들 디어레스 도시 바람 디 메나 자단도서 떨토고 말했어 바람디 디치셔도 바람도 춘그 견셔에서 말아 다가서 잡고 있네 이상 비등에 사드줄다 바람 거 말아 진짜 딘지주 고성 딘문에 이나네 다다디 베디 따다리도 비버치비 싫었다 파기 차고 다 시디디 이 딱딱다 반 이상 된 등이들 아니 전주세면나 매바 차용도 전에 돈이도 비실이 장박이 이상 비투고 메디 아니 도시다 보세요지.
So likewise, the Buddha himself has described bodhicitta as like a diamond. So there's different kind of reasons given for why bodhicitta is like a diamond. But it means it has this connotation. In one explanation, you find the explanation that bodhicitta piercing has that piercing kind of property, in the sense that it pierces deeper. It kind of is able to cut even the subtlest obscurations. And Geshe-la likes to take the example. He says that, for example, in the south of India, for example, where water is rare, you have to dig for water, you have to dig a well and get water through it. In order to get water from within the ground, and in order to be able to dwell through, to go through the stones, he was told that this machine that does the drilling has a diamond at its top, because a diamond is indestructible. So in order to go through mud, of course, you don't need a diamond, but when there's rocks or when there's strong stones in the ground, that kind of diamond can drill through them, can pierce through these stones, and then eventually is able to retrieve the water. So likewise here, that's what bodhicitta. Bodhicitta has that property of being able to pierce through something. So in other words, the mind that realizes emptiness in itself doesn't have the strength or the force to cut through or to eliminate even the subtlest kind of obscurations. It is in assistance or in cooperation with bodhicitta or bodhicitta as the assisting factor, which provides that wisdom with the ability to pierce through or to eliminate even the subtlest kind of obscurations. In that way, bodhicitta is like a diamond.
다 고와 덴지지 라바이네 데스데 팽기레디 디게 돈이도 비시럽 조제 전주심디 디 연하이 고하디마도 삼로 디게 돈 전주심 조제 돈이도 비시럽디 연하 고하 단데 라요 말이.
So understanding that, there's definitely some benefit, but one doesn't really understand how, nonetheless, the main kind of factor is the mind, the wisdom that realizes emptiness, and secondary theory to that is bodhicitta. One hasn't really gained an understanding of that yet.
所以到这里我们拿到的理解依旧是空正见最主要，菩提心是之分。
但你们那现在参谋돈이도 비시럽 연하 레송에디 먼저 페이지 고대요. 연하 대다 듬진 비시럽 돈도 송 중중나는 송만나 신디 먼저 뭐 고대요. 먼저 잘 뭐 퇴대요. 연하 참모 님네 참모 돈이도 비시럽 연하도 지니까 님네 제야지.
So the fact that all the other practices are just a kind of a branch practice or a secondary practice to the mind that realizes emptiness. So this we've heard many times. For example, in the Bodhisattva way of life by Shantideva, this explanation is repeatedly given for all the other practices other than the wisdom realizing emptiness are secondary.
他说呢，一切的所有的其他修行都是之分，那最主要修行是证空慧。
돈이도 비시럽 연하시되 돈이 또야기 연하게 지시기고 말아. 돈이 뭐또 보면 공대 펠 탈을 친거 된지기 연하를 기지시나 마도 돈이 또 버전기 치들라는 더 아니 연하를 이 말이 참.
This doesn't mean that there are. This doesn't mean in order to realize emptiness that they serve as a kind of secondary, as a kind of an assisting secondary factor. But it's rather in order to realize emptiness, to then generate, to kind of enhance that generation, enhance that realization of emptiness, and then to finalize the realization of emptiness. So in other words, all these different stages, from the point of view of all these different stages, they kind of serve as secondary assisting forces. It is not just for newly realizing emptiness, otherwise they wouldn't be secondary factors.
다 전주기 생 쪼지는 kom 시다 참디 연하도 지니 도스 조단디 다나 공부를 주기 전주 샘제 나는 송래. 산남단이 송남단 가야 산지 송대다 대다 전주 샘기 철 공신남지 송바인스 나도 전주 샘기 차시라고 하라. 다 규람 미자와 규르카신 나로 전주 샘기 연하도 군을 던진 거버체스. 간제다 대바 친구기 있는데 같이 송샤고 참아 전주 샘기 연하 전주 샘기 차시에스. 어디 공부를 주기 송나요?
So here Therefore, bodhicitta, there's also an explanation here that bodhicitta is the kind of main practice, and all other practices are just secondary. They're the secondary kind of practices. So this is specifically expressed in Nagarjuna's commentary on bodhicitta. So Geshe-la gave this quote here, which I can only summarize, and Geshe-la did the same, he summarized it. So there are a few lines here where it says that bodhicitta is kind of like the parts. They're like the parts. The other practices, all the Mahayana practices, they are all the kind of parts of bodhicitta. In other words, these kind of assisting factors of bodhicitta, and this is what the all-knowing one has said. So therefore, we need to understand how bodhicitta